Welcome to the One Player Podcast. I'm your host, Julius, and this is episode 325.
Oh no!
Thank you, Kaidavar, very much. I appreciate that you're so sad to be recording a podcast with me that you're already saying, oh no.
Yes, just deeply saddened. Just ready to go bawl my eyes out.
But I'm sure all of our listeners already know what's up because they've already seen the podcast title. Today is going to be a popular mechanics episode where we take a particular mechanic or a particular theme or idea and we discuss some various games that we think exemplify that idea. And today we are going to be discussing tragic games. And I think maybe each of us have our own definition or idea of what a tragic game is, but we'll get around to that. But I'm here today with both of my children. I'm here today with Chaya Devora.
Hello.
And with my son, Deli.
Hi.
And we're actually recording live from our outdoor sukkah because it is the middle of our Sukkot holiday. We thought it would be particularly nice to record a podcast out here, and it is actually a lovely day outside.
I'm hoping it's like this tomorrow because lately it's been really cold at night.
It is beautiful right now, and I'm greatly enjoying it. But we are going to begin with our tragic games, and I'm going to make an absolute tragedy, but I think for round one, we're going to go from youngest to oldest. So, Deli, why don't you tell me what your first tragic game is and why you think it's actually, I'll introduce it, and then you'll tell me why you think it's tragic. So what is the first one on your list?
Endangered.
Endangered. That is a really good suggestion. Endangered is a cooperative game where you are working together as a team of specialists of different types, where there are different endangered species. So there's different scenarios where you'll pick an endangered species. And each of the different scenarios involves a specific species, whether it's the elephants, the pandas, the dolphins, turtles, all sorts of different animals. And your job is to both to protect those animals from the forces of destruction, whatever it be for the particular animal, as well as convince a bunch of politicians that it'd be a good idea to spend money trying to save these animals.
It's also not just politicians, it's celebrities and all sorts of other people.
Well, you are celebrities, but you are trying to convince politicians that they should put money into it.
To convince the world governments.
Yes, and the way you win is by convincing the politicians to buy in. So, Deli, why is that a tragic game?
What if the animals die? You don't want the animals to be lost.
Especially the great pandas.
Yeah!
Did you play elephants with Mommy?
Yes, I did.
So the first game we played of this, my wife's favorite animal is an elephant. So the first game of this we played elephants, which is one of the later expansion elephants, the African gray elephant. It's one of the later expansion ones, so it's a little more difficult, I think. But suffice it to say, unfortunately, animals died out. And my wife was never pleased and hesitated to pick up the game for a while afterwards because of how sad she was that she killed the elephants.
I think I played the giant pandas. I think the same fate happened to me.
I will say, it's only tragic if you lose.
Yes.
Okay.
But a lot of the times you do lose. From my experience, I've lost like most of the time. I don't remember anything I've won.
Find a tragic game where you win.
Challenge accepted. My first game.
I actually have one on my list that I've won. I find it pretty tragic. With basically the same idea as Deli's. I can introduce it if you want.
Sure, you want to do yours and then I'll do my challenge accepted?
We did say youngest
I did also have Endangered on my list, but another one on my list was Leviathan Wilds. So this is a game where there's different kinds of, I think it's like just creatures. They aren't from this world. And so there's...
Well, nobody is from this world. It's a different world entirely.
Well, okay, fine. But there's like these gemstones growing and all these things that make the animals kind of like corrupted and sad and not really wanting to like have any human interaction or interaction with us. So they are kind of going to try and kind of like, I suppose, kill us and like kind of shake us off their backs. And so our objective of the game is to get rid of the crystals and heal the animals. I find that kind of tragic because the animal is like, it's been corrupted. It has a bunch of things that are on its back and it's hurting them. So I find that kind of tragic. It's kind of like the same category. If I win, then that's great. I win. And it's great. It's a celebration. But if I lose, then animals very sad, and I find that tragic.
That's fair. I definitely hear where you're coming from, but I want to accept the challenge from Deli if we can. Because Deli had challenged me to find a game that is tragic whether you're winning or losing. And the one that I want to pick from that is Anachrony. Now, I don't know that either of you have ever played Anachrony.
No.
I might have. I recognize it.
Anachrony is a gigantic game. Well, it's not gigantic. It got more gigantic with the expansion. But it is a large game from Mind Clash Games. That the essential idea of it is you are a government where there was a terrible explosion that had blown up large portions of the world, and the world's already set back. It was destructive, and you are trying to pick up the pieces. But as part of the explosion, you started finding these strange elements, strange metals all around, that you figured out you can use for time travel. And as you started doing these experiments, you figured out that the explosion that literally rocked the world was a meteor striking the Earth with this element. And because the element is a time travel element, a portion of the explosion got sent back in time and rocked the world. But you're about to hit the actual meteor hitting the world. So halfway through the game, a giant tragedy is going to occur that will literally restructure the game. And your entire point of the game is to evacuate society from Earth as best as you can before and after this meteor hits the Earth, to try and salvage as much as you can in the face of this tragedy.
Okay, so yeah, I see how that's tragic whether you're winning or losing, because if you win, I'm assuming you evacuated everybody, but that's good, but also Earth is now been hit by a meteor. Right, it's now destroyed, and if you lose, now humans are destroyed in the process.
I think you cheated. You said tragedy in your speech about it. It's definitely
That's not cheating.
Yeah, it is.
There's nothing about cheating. That's the whole point of this.
Well, there is sometimes, but I don't think I cheated.
Told ya.
But how about I challenge you, Deli? What's your second game option?
Pandemic?
Pandemic, just plain Pandemic?
Yeah.
Which one? Because there's like 15 million of them.
The one that you lose in.
The one that you lose in. Well,
Yeah.
we never lose in Pandemic.
What about Germany?
I
I don't know what
don't.
you're talking about Germany.
Or how about Europe? What was it with all the black cubes?
Sorry, but you do.
You don't tell that story publicly.
I'm sorry, but you do. So I'm gonna go with that one.
Pandemic, but only if you lose.
Yeah, but only if you lose.
So as a note for anyone who's not familiar with Pandemic,
I still think it's tragic even if you win.
for anyone who's not familiar with Pandemic, Pandemic is another cooperative game where there is a plague that has been let loose. And your goal is you are a set of researchers and scientists who are attempting to develop a cure and deploy that cure to rescue the world from 4 different plagues. So you have to go contain the plagues, treat the plagues in order to develop science points, and you will use those points to then turn them into a cure, essentially. And then once you have all 4 cures, you'll win the game, but otherwise you can use the cure to more effectively treat the different plagues. So theoretically, you're supposed to win the game, and I don't think it's too particularly tragic if you win.
It could be, because it's kind of the same thing as Anachrony, because
Why do you want
there's still a plague.
Tragedy /
There's still a plague
unleashed in the first place?
It's like with COVID. This is kind of like a deja vu thing, but it's like COVID. There was everybody was safe. Most people were safe. They were inside their homes, but a lot of people also they lost their jobs. There was still the plague, and that plague is never going away.
I suppose
COVID is still here. You can still get it. It's just not as bad.
I will say I tried for my lists and my definition of tragedy to try and be something where it's not only a tragedy if you're winning, if you're losing in certain aspects, because I had a consideration for a number of games where it's an absolute tragedy if I'm playing through the game and then I have a bad die roll or a bad card comes up.
Yeah.
And it is tragic if all of a sudden I'm doing well and then suddenly doing poorly. I had a lot of ideas for that.
I think what I recently had done on Mythic Mischief, where I've been playing, I started out well, had a good placement, and then you have a triple catch, and I'm like, well then. I guess I'm not winning anymore.
Yeah, so I didn't want those to be tragic where it's only tragic in certain situations. I wanted it to be something that exemplifies tragedy at all times. So that's why I was trying to shy away from things like pandemic, because if you're winning, if you're doing well, it may be that there's a motivating force, but you're doing well, and it just doesn't feel nearly as tragic.
But I still feel like it could be. It's not as tragic if you win, but there's still a slight air of tragedy because some people still, like, died. There's, some people still died.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some families lost their family members, and that's a tragedy for them. It may not be, like, in the grand scheme of the game, but if you think deeper into it, if you think into the world of the game, there's definitely a tragedy going on
You're also not going to save every town.
I hear you.
And every city, and some might die and get hit by a pandemic.
Okay.
And
I hear.
You don't really want that to happen.
I hear. Alright, so Khadvar, I want to ask you what your second game was.
My second game was Mysterium.
Mysterium was a tragedy?
I mean, somebody died, and that's kind of what the point it is.
Why don't you do a quick refresher of what Mysterium is?
Mysterium is a game where you are a ghost of... You are basically haunting the mansion that you have died in. And there are some people who are going to try and figure out who killed you. So you're going to give them a person, a place, and a thing to each separate person. And at the end, you're going to put all those things together. You're going to pick one person that goes with a place and a thing. And they are going to have to guess out of those 3 clues you give them which one it is. And you're going to give them clues like throughout the game.
So I will just say, setting aside the issue of tragedy, Khadvar does record a bunch with me. And she knows that this is a one-player podcast. And she knows that we are a board game dedicated to solitaire, a podcast dedicated to solitaire board games.
Solo.
Mysterium is solo?
Yeah, I asked you.
I think
I asked you in the general area of this game. Are they all solo? Can you list the ones that aren't solo? You do not list Mysterium in there.
I think you should change
so it's my fault?
Uh-huh.
Sorry.
I can pick a different one for you.
Pick another real quick.
Well, set aside that, I don't think it's tragic. Someone died in the way past history.
I don't know if this is way past history.
It's like way past history. Look at the people on the pictures. They're old people.
Yeah.
But yeah, give us another option, please.
Okay.
People die.
I also have Pandemic on there. And then my last one was Horrified because I'm picturing it here like everybody's evacuated. I'm not actually sure if this is how it is. There's also like pitchforks and torches and...
So, Horrified, do you want to summarize Horrified?
Horrified is a game where there's monsters and you are a person and you're trying to expel the monsters, I believe.
You're trying to just defeat the different monsters?
Just in different ways. So, like, with the lagoon monster, there's, like, you can take little pieces that you collect around the board, and you just, like, go through the lagoon to defeat them. For, like, Frankenstein and the Bride, I think you have to, like, get them together. Either that or it's, like, keep them apart. But etc. for all the different monsters and, like, to do with their stories. So I feel like that's tragic because one of the pieces is also pitchforks, there's torches, all the town is basically empty. Like, you don't see a person anywhere on the town. So I feel like the monsters have kind of, like, driven all the people out of the town.
I will also say, people will randomly show up, and quite often will randomly die.
Oh, yeah. They will.
People will almost always die in that game.
Yeah. It's definitely tragic, because also I've seen, I think with, like, Frankenstein and the Bride, I think that Frankenstein has definitely taken one of the people and has just kidnapped her to his little tower.
Yeah. I hear that.
And then you have to, like, save them, bring them back to where they are. There's definitely an air of tragedy. It's not the most tragic game, but there's definitely an air.
Well, let me go with my second game. My second one is Under Falling Skies. Under Falling Skies is a solo-only game where in this game there has been an alien invasion a la Independence Day. There's a giant mothership hovering over Earth and it's slowly getting closer and it's going to blow up a city if it gets too close. And your job is to dig out your base to get some additional energy and resources to be able to deploy a virus against the mothership to beat it off, and otherwise you're trying to shoot down the ships before they can pelt your city to smithereens. Now, the reason why I said this one is certainly tragic is, again, I want to try and stick with the idea that it's definitely tragic. This one I felt was certainly tragic because Under Falling Skies is supposed to be a campaign game where you're playing through the 4 chapters with the final boss battle at the end where you're doing all of them at once. But it's supposed to be a campaign game. And in the course of the campaign, each time you open it, you're presented with 2 cities. And you have a choice. One of the cities you fight for, and one of the cities gets exploded. And you always have that choice. And the exploded city is exploded and removed from the campaign. So it's definitely tragic because you're in the middle of a tragedy, you're having to deal with it. Theoretically, you can always win. But at the very least, even if you always win, a city will always get blown up each stage of the campaign. So that's why I wanted to put in the tragic setting, tragic ideas.
My last one is Purim.
Purim?
Purim.
Why Purim? Purim's a tragedy?
First of all, you explain it.
So Purim is a cooperative game that I don't think we've discussed in the podcast. But Purim is a cooperative card game based on the story of the Megillah of Esther and the story of Purim.
It's solo.
It is solo friendly.
Okay.
It is a cooperative. It is a cooperative game. It can't be solo well to handle. And it is based on the story of Purim, where immediately afterwards, if you're familiar with the story, Haman has been denounced in front of King Achashverosh, and it is now your job as messengers to spread out the good news that the Jews are allowed to assemble and fight back. Unfortunately, in this game, Haman's sons have decided to send out his own counter messengers to try and mess with the message you're sending and prevent it from being sent out. And so your job is to make sure to get it out to all of the different districts of the Assyrian Empire, whichever empire it is, to get out to all the districts so that all the Jews can live and try and avoid the deaths which the game is trying to cause, the death of at least any Jews. You're trying to avoid any of the districts from having dead Jews in it. And Deli's putting this in the category of tragedy because,
first of all, the sons of Haman are there, and
they're the bad guys?
They're the bad guys. I don't want the sons of Haman.
I can make that same claim against any other thing with the bad guy in it. What's so special about this game?
What's so special about this game?
Like the loop is a tragedy because it has a bad guy?
No! This one's more of a tragedy because it's about us.
I see.
So you're just biased.
So, yes. This actually happened. Or could have happened.
It follows the typical theme of we won, let's have a party.
You could also make the point that it's tragic because Esther was forced into a marriage with Achashverosh. She did not want to be in that marriage.
That's a whole bunch of other history. You guys are way outside the game.
I'm claiming.
But
this was like
inside the game. I'm claiming not tragedy.
Where you don't want these people to send out messages. You just want to get to it. Plus, what if the Jews do die, and what if they aren't able to send out messages?
Okay.
What if their messages get stopped?
I claim not tragedy.
Yeah, again, that's just tragic if you lose.
Fine.
It doesn't match my definition. I understand where you're coming from. It just doesn't match my definition.
I'll swap to the spill then.
The spill?
The spill.
A good swap. The spill is... I do find it funny the amount of cooperative games that have come up, because I think almost all of these are cooperative. But the spill is another cooperative card game where, again, you have a nature... A tragedy, an environmental tragedy, where there's been an oil spill, and it's threatening all of the fish life in the area, and it's your job to clean the spill and rescue the fish through a series of action selection across the game. It's a very pandemic style-ish type game where you have different actions around the board to try and clear objectives, and you do a thing, the game does the thing over and over again, until either there's too much oil or too many dead animals, and your job is to clear the oil and rescue all the animals. So Deli is saying it's a tragedy because at the beginning of the game there is an oil spill, there is a calamity, and you have to fix it. Is that the tragedy?
So yeah, that's one of the tragedies. Plus, guess what happens if you don't fix it? First of all, huge drought. Second of all, it's super hard to clear all the oil, so some fish life might still die. Who wants fish to die?
Okay.
It's a good source of food, protein. Fourth of all, how are you gonna get gefilte fish for Shabbos?
Sure.
Okay.
So, Chayadvar, do you have a third game?
Well, I had Endangered, Mysterium, Pandemic, Horrified, and Leviathan Wilds. It's a
So
good
we've gone
five
through-
games.
So let me do my final one then. My last one is Flatline. Flatline is yet another cooperative game, where in Flatline, it is a real-time cooperative game, and I see Dilly is pointing out to me that he had this one as an option as well. It is a real-time cooperative game where you have a set of patients in these space-age beds, that there's been a battle on board your spaceship, and you have various people who have been injured, and it's your job to use these cool med-base beds to fix them by rearranging different icons to solve whatever the issues are. And the way you do that is you'll have a set of dice, and you have to roll the dice fast enough and exchange them between different players and trigger various abilities and avoid negative bad things using your dice. And you very often have very limited resources, and you have to pick very quickly how it is that you're going to allocate your resources and use your rerolls and use your abilities to change things and just use your dice to be able to cure these patients and figure out what to do. So it is a very tense game. The real-time aspects of it keep you high up, but in my opinion, the tragedy is just there was a battle, and you appear to have not done great because you've got a lot of injured, and are solving them. It's probably the closest I got to this concern that...
I think that also the title in itself is just
Flatline.
tragic, like Flatline.
Yeah.
Your
don't
heart
want-
rate's
yeah.
dead already.
You're already
before
dead.
you even start, you lost.
Yeah.
It felt like it was stretching it for me, because again, if you're doing great and you're healing all your patients, then like you're doing your job, and we don't really know what happened. So like if you're doing your job, you're doing a great job. It's not a real tragedy, but that's hard. So this one was pushing it for me, but it was the best I could have. But hopefully it was not too much of a tragedy that I went outside my rules for tragedy.
What? How is that? You can have too much of a tragedy.
Stop.
No,
Stop.
if it,
I'm gonna break something.
I'm saying if it wasn't too much of a tragedy for me to have broken my rules. I was
Nice
Too
pun.
much of a
I
tragedy.
was making a pun, Dolly. I was making a pun.
Huh?
And your inability to understand my pun is also a tragedy.
Yes, it is. It most definitely is.
And having filled my pun quotient for today, which itself is also a tragedy, I think we're going to leave you for tonight.
I have one more pun. It's very sad that we have to finish the we have to end the podcast. What a tragedy.
Have a good night, everyone.
What was your pun?
Thanks for listening. We love feedback, so we love hearing from you. You can reach me at julius@oneplayerpodcast.com or JLBird on BGG, and Albert can be reached at albert@oneplayerpodcast.com or Fractaloon on BGG. Our website is oneplayerpodcast.com with the number 1, and we're also on Twitter at oneplayerpodcast. The intro music is copyright Angus, can be found at jamendo.com. The transition music is copyright by Dan Elduce Pancaldi, whose page is at donpancaldi.com. The One Player Podcast is protected under a Creative Commons share-alike license. Thanks for listening.